Good evening, everyone. Marhaba, assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Dalia Ghanem from the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start delving in these very important questions and very complex issue, I want to introduce first our keynote speaker, Sarah Douglas. Sarah is the Deputy Chief of UN Women's Peace and Security. She has worked for over 20 years on women, peace, and security. She is currently the Deputy Chief of the Peace and Security Section at the UN Women's New York headquarters. She has an extensive knowledge on these questions and worked on integrating gender and women issues into security sector reform, but also into DDR, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. Thank you, Sarah, for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dalia. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to express the gratitude and appreciation on behalf of UN Women for the opportunity to engage in tonight's event. I'd also like to thank our organizers and partners, the Middle East Council for Global Affairs, the WPS Policy Hub of the Ism Faris Institute, for convening us today for this critical discussion on women's leadership in peace in the MENA region. I would also like to express my admiration for the courageous work of the experts and pioneers in peacebuilding and the amazing panelists that we have here at tonight's event. This year marks the 25th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325, the cornerstone of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. Although we are commemorating this anniversary, it is by no means a celebration. Last year's Secretary General's report on women, peace, and security paints a very concerning picture. Decades of progress on peace and women's empowerment and gender equality are at risk as global levels of armed conflict and militarization have reached alarming highs. Women's participation in peace processes is shrinking at a time when their contributions are more essential than ever, and also the number of peace processes are also reducing. For example, in 2023, women accounted for only 9.6% of negotiators and 13.7% of mediators in peace agreements that were reached that year. The share of peace agreements that referenced women and girls also dropped to 26% compared to 28% the year before. At the same time, between 2022 and 2023, we saw a 50% increase in cases of conflict-related sexual violence, and tragically, a doubling of the proportion of women and girls who are killed in armed conflict. For decades, the MENA region has been affected by prolonged conflicts and crisis and stalled mediation and peace processes in which women have largely been excluded. This is despite the well-documented fact of the disproportionate impact of conflict, escalation, displacement, and humanitarian crises have on women. Furthermore, we know that the most vulnerable women, widows, refugees, displaced women, women with disabilities, face compounding inequalities and often end up paying the highest price when conflict and crisis struck, as has been evident in the last years from the devastating crises in Gaza, Lebanon, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. This underscores the urgent need for gender-sensitive and targeted solutions for both conflict and crisis response, resolution, and recovery. At the same time, we have to reverse the false narrative which paints women solely as victims. Despite the bleak global picture of peacemaking, women still remain at the forefront of grassroots peacebuilding and local mediation efforts and play critical roles in building cohesive, peaceful communities across the MENA region. UN Women's research has highlighted the vital role of women in this region and how they have played key roles at the local level in negotiating humanitarian access, mediating ceasefires, brokering the release of political prisoners, preventing and resolving tribal conflicts, and engaging in cross-line negotiations to secure access to water and other vital resources that benefit not only women, but the entire community. Furthermore, over the last decade, UN Women has been supporting and advocating for women leaders' meaningful participation in peace and political processes in the region at the formal levels, precisely because we understand that in order to obtain sustainable, positive peace benefiting all levels of society, it is essential to ensure that women are part and parcel of conflict prevention, mediation, decision-making at all levels. As part of this work, UN Women, among other interventions, has been supporting, in collaborating with our dear partners in the room tonight, the Women, Peace and Security Working Group in the Arab States region. This amazing group provides fresh perspectives and new strategies for the meaningful implementation of the WPS agenda in the region, including concrete recommendations for ensuring women's meaningful participation and leadership in peace processes. Over the last 3 days, I've had the enormous pleasure of witnessing this group in action, and I am really invigorated by the possibilities this group provides for finding long-term solutions for achieving sustainable and positive peace in this region. Although it's very hard to find hope in the world right now, interacting with these amazing colleagues has given me a tremendous amount of hope over the last few years. Therefore, and without any further ado, it is my pleasure now to hand over the floor back to some of these brilliant members participating in the working group to hear their insights and recommendations for the way forward in ensuring women's inclusive participation and leadership for peace in the MENA region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, for this. You gave me the perfect transition. So, as Sarah said, the Middle East faces persistent conflict and crisis. Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria serve as a recent stark reminders of a region grappling with war and conflict and instability. While these conflicts inflict profound suffering on women, they also highlight their remarkable resilience. However, women's essential contributions to ceasefire negotiation, reconstruction effort, national reconciliation, and peace-building initiative remain largely overlooked. As Sarah mentioned, women accounted for only 9.6% in the negotiation processes. So systemic injustice coupled with the international community's selective engagement in addressing conflict further impede women's meaningful participation in peace processes. Despite these challenges, women across the MENA region are actively transforming the status quo through innovative approaches, creating vital spaces for dialogue, and demonstrating the transformative power of inclusive peace building. To talk about this today, I have the pleasure to welcome 4 amazing women scholars, and I will start with Dr. Dalal Iraqat. Dalal is Associate Professor of Diplomacy and Strategic Thinking at the Arab American University, Palestine. We have also Dr. Rubam Haysan, who is the founder and director of Sawa for Development and Aid. Dr. Noura Shuaibi, a dear friend here, who is Assistant Professor of Political Science in Kuwait University. And finally, we have Karma Akmekji. She's the lead advisor, Women, Peace and Security Regional Hub at the Issam Faris Institute. So I'm going to start with a general question for all of you to kick off the discussion, and I want each of you to give me her own perspective on this general question. This question is about understanding the intersection of gender, conflict, and peace. So I'm going to start with Dr. Iraqat. How does conflict impact women and men differently in the MENA region? And how do gender dynamics shape the causes, consequences, and resolution of conflict? Please.
Thank you very much, Dalia. Allow me please to thank everybody who showed up here today with us. And also gratitude goes to the Middle East Council for Global Affairs, the Issam Faris Institute for Public Policy, and UN Women for organizing this panel. And since we are in Doha, please allow me to convey a message of gratitude on behalf of the Palestinian people to the Qatari government that had finally brokered the ending of the genocide that our people have been suffering for the past 15 months. Again, we also want to show respect to the Qatari government that continues to remind the mediators and the international players that Palestine is not merely a humanitarian file, that Palestine, and for the ceasefire to sustain, needs a political, comprehensive framework. And here I want to thank, of course, His Highness Sheikh Tamim and the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and all the people who were working relentlessly, and they put and demonstrated a lot of effort to safeguard and end the sufferings endured by 2.2 million Palestinian civilians. Half of those are children. Going back to your question, had you asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have answered differently. But when we look at conflict from an academic perspective, we learn and we teach our students that in order to resolve any conflict, we need to tackle the root causes of that conflict. And in the Middle East, we cannot neglect the Israeli military occupation. We cannot talk and address conflicts in general academic terms without specifying the urgency and the cause behind all those sufferings. Having said so, I need to mention that for the past 20 years, for some data, 67% of the Palestinian civilians killed in the Palestinian occupied territories by the Israeli military authorities were men, and women were not more than 14%. But since October 2023, those percentages have shifted. As of today, 70% of the victims and of the targeted are women and children. And here I want to say that the Israeli military occupation had actually redefined the dynamics of gender when we look at conflicts. And allow me, as a mother, my daughter is 13, her name is Sarah, and as a sister, and as a daughter as well, tell you that in Palestine, the military occupation authorities target every Palestinian, every civilian, every human, no matter what. If you are a male, female, if you are young, if you are old, if you are Muslim, if you are Christian, if you are left or right, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Every Palestinian is target to the Israeli military occupation. So if we look at the conflict and its impacts from a gender lens, we can speak about, displacement, whether it is forced or voluntarily. We can speak about the package that the Israeli military occupation comes with apartheid and racist policies, with the extrajudicial killings, with the arbitrary detentions, with the confiscations, not only of land, by the way, but also of property, and the misuse and deprivation of basic human rights on a daily basis. Then the target is literally men and women and everybody, because everything is the target of the Israeli military machine. Their goal is to rid us from our right to self-determination. Their goal is to annex the land and to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, of course, to serve the greater interest of their state. But one of the most important and trending impact of conflicts is, of course, sexual violence. And here, allow me to say that after 15 months of genocide, we were fortunate that many international human rights organizations, including the UN Women, have documented all the crimes of rape, of gender-based violence, of the mental health issues, of the physical and sexual harassment. But the one fact that we need to also to remember that this did not only impact women, but it also reached every Palestinian man. And here, as a Palestinian, I need to be the voice of the Palestinian women and men and convey that message. Yet, despite all those challenges and the odds, the message that we need to also remember is that Palestinian women continue to portray that image and demonstration of resilience, of social justice, of maintaining and sustaining the Palestinian community and its resilience on the ground. So it is the resort. Palestinian women continue to demonstrate their ability and capabilities by merit and by knowledge and by education and by caring and by providing all different services of, healthcare, education to the communities, to make sure that the Palestinian woman who has sacrificed, who is in jail now, hundreds of Palestinian women are in detention behind Israeli bars without trial. So the levels of injustices are hard to just describe. However, the challenge and the opportunity that we face today in the Middle East is that justice must be inclusive, and that peace cannot come without justice. And if we all respect and don't, debate this basic fact, then we should not be debating that women must be at the tables. And here, I must also reiterate that I'm not advocating for checking the checklist of, gender, or just, adding a flavor to the negotiating or peace-building tables. No. We are saying that women need to be at the table equally as men, but by, of course, merit and capabilities and the qualifications in conflict resolution, in mediation, in peace processes. One last point, maybe, that, just to reflect on reality. In Palestine, like other Arab states, and here I must reiterate that, conflicts in the Middle East, as a Palestinian, we're always focused on Palestine, but I must mention also Sudan, Libya, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon. Arab women had endured a lot of sufferings, yet they remain the cornerstone of what keeps our nations together, of what keeps hope, and of what keeps the dreams alive. We are raising the generations of tomorrow. And that's why I'm reminding everybody that we all have a challenge and an opportunity to adopt inclusivity into justice, and to make sure that the peace that we aspire and we desire is very much coming with justice. For any agreement, whether it's a ceasefire, hostage exchange, peace-building agreements, in order for it to sustain, and from an academic, of course, perspective as well, many studies had shown that to ensure the durability, the sustainability, and the success of any agreement, then women have to be at the table. It's not about, luxury. We're not just using a rhetoric. This has been experienced, and here we come as Palestinian, as women, from all the Arab region. I'm really proud today that we come from Lebanon, Syria, Kuwait, and Qatar, and Morocco, or Tunisia together. But no, I'm very proud, really, I'm very proud that we are walking the talk of the Arab women leaders who will definitely bring the aspired change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arafat. I love, there is one quote that I took when you say justice must be inclusive. Absolutely. And I think, as you said, women should be around the table, but it is not about just adding women to the table. It's about making the men's and women experience in all stages of, designing the programs, evaluation, designing, monitoring, and so on and so forth. So we're going to move to Dr. Mhaysan, and maybe you can tell us more about Syria and also your experience as a Syrian Lebanese also scholar. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I was shocked that the mic opened quickly. The people at Middle East Council would know it's an inside joke, but 3 seconds. No, I'm very honored, honestly, to be here. I made them laugh. I'm very, very honored to be here. And honestly, Dalal, to echo you, it's the first public panel that I do without Assad. And yes. It's the first public panel that I do with the majority of prisoners not in prison. And it's the first public panel that I do with my husband in Damascus right now. So, and I cannot be more thankful also, it's not because we are in Qatar, shukran Qatar, no, but really we cannot be more thankful because Qatar did play a big role in brokering this, this whole new situation, the liberation of Syria and the removal of the Assad regime. And I'm just going to go back to the question that Dalia answered, محفظ الألقاب للجميع. I'm sure everyone in this room is either a husband, a father, a brother, but for sure a son. Yeah, this is for sure. So, you all know the role of women in your families. And especially Arab men, they know that Arab women are very, very, very central to families and to communities. Arab women are not oppressed, depressed, repressed, and all the est, and waiting for people to come and save them. No, to the contrary, we are very matriarchal societies, and we are societies where women carry a lot of responsibilities without bragging a lot about it. Now, our new generation, we know how to market ourselves more. So I keep reminding my husband, I do this very well and this, so that he, you know. But in general, we carry a lot of burdens. And the same way, you know, we carry these burdens in a normal, privileged life. For example, when I travel, my husband calls to ask where the kids' pajamas are, whereas they are in the same place that they've always been. So imagine how things are in a war. In a war, this impact, this burden that women carry is much, much, much bigger. This is to really simplify. I've been working in refugee camps for the last 14 years. And honestly, the burden that women carry are incredible burdens. Women face bigger burdens in displacement. The majority of refugees are women-headed households. More than 70% of families today in Syria are, who have been displaced and in turn displaced are women-headed households, which means the women have to take all the decisions. They have to take decisions about moving and being redisplaced once and twice and 3 times. The majority of families that pre-Assad were looking for their loved ones and post-Assad are still looking just to be able to, visit a grave for their loved ones. The majority of these family networks are founded by women. In displacement, also the double burden that women carry is huge because they have to negotiate to receive a food basket, they have to negotiate with de facto powers on the ground, they have to be in new countries where things are extremely difficult for them. And in families where men are there, there's also sensitivity around masculinity because if you're a refugee man and you're not fighting, your masculinity is a bit shaken, you know, and if you're a refugee man but you can't provide for your family, your masculinity is a bit shaken because we live in a society that also expects a lot from men, and men are suffering a lot as well. But this also, بفشوا خلقهم بالنسوان. We know it, like they bring it out on their women, and women have to face additional violence in the tents. Of course, GBV has been used as a weapon of war, economic exploitation. We saw a lot of reports from organizations that work with women, whereby women had to face sexual exploitation to have access to aid, you know. So this goes throughout all of the exclusions, and on top of that, in wars, women are not they are not invited to participate at all tables. And people right now, it's very funny because every time I go somewhere now, people ask me, what do you think will be the fate of women in Syria? You know? Or what is the role of women in New Syria? And nobody has asked me what is the role of men, but they always ask what is the role of women. I mean, it's exactly the same. But people are scared that under this interim government and the future government, I mean, whoever it's going to be after, there will be a democratic transition, we hope. We are scared that women will not be represented enough. They will not. I mean, let me tell you one thing. Women were extremely excluded under the Assad regime as well. And women were extremely excluded under the opposition bodies. So we know as women that we have to grab these spaces and take these spaces and open these opportunities. They will not be open for us. But we will, and we are, and we have a lot of allies today because we have a lot of male allies as well who are supporting us in this. So yes, women face additional burdens, but as Dalal said, men and women are facing huge burdens in conflicts. And right now, if we think about this phase, for example, when families are coming back, a lot of the returnees to Syria are women-headed households as well. And a lot of them, don't have access to their HLP rights because originally land wasn't put in their names, or when their father died, the transition of these lands. So we have right now also HLP challenges. So the challenges are many, but I believe as Dalal said, we are progressing. It's so sad when I was hearing Dalal, I could think that if we remove Israelis, and I'm not comparing anyone to Israelis because they're on another level, but really Bashar al-Assad regime used a lot of the tactics of the Israelis on Syria. So right now, يعني the coming phase of Syria is very challenging. We will have a lot of challenges, security challenges, we have economic challenges, we have social tensions, we have a fragmented society, we have returnees who will return to a land where there is no electricity, there is no schools, there is no hospital, there is no infrastructure, there are no homes, and women will bear this burden more. But yani, inshallah, at least we are saying that at least we are coming back to Syria that will be our own. So we will rebuild and we will yani, put our hands together and hopefully try to disentangle all of these issues and with the help of everyone in this room and everyone who loves Syria, I hope.
Thank you, Dr. Mhaisa. But by now, after spending 2 days with me in the workshop, you know how I function. I love grab and go's idea. So yours would be, and I love this quote, it would be, we women to grab these places, and to do so, we need male allies. I love this. So I'm going to move to Dr. Shaibi, please, if you could give us your perspective on the question.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Dialogue such as this is very, very important, and we need more of it. I want to echo a point that Ruba talked about, is the importance of women in our society. I have evidence to back that up, and it's mind-blowing. There are academics out there that actually consult on policy. What they do is they want to predict when a said country would have a more favorable foreign policy to another country, right? For example, I don't want to name countries right now, it's just that's what the process is. The way they study it to see which generation will be friendlier to the other country is looking at the women. So how many women are covered, hijab, how many women are not? When they look at generations of women that are covered, they predict that their sons will be more conservative. So their sons are more conservative. This means they will hold policy positions that are more conservative in foreign policy towards the said country. If women were not, they predict that they will be more liberal, so let's take advantage of that. So this is how the importance and role of women is played out there. But we don't really know about it. And that's how policy is really shaped in some countries in the future to predict foreign policy. So this is how important women are. There is an inherent problem to quantify the value of women. This is what we have. That's the lack of quantifying it, because there has been systems for centuries that have quantified the work and output, KPIs and percentages of success for men in the workplace, men, what have you. But women's work has been informal. It hasn't been documented for years, so it's very difficult for a woman to come and prove to her counterpart, I am important, you need me. Because it is, we're not used to talking in numbers, statistics, and all of that, but what we do, what women do is huge. So this is something that we can see now. Traditionally, looking at the connection between how war and conflict actually impacts women and men differently, traditional norms and traditional sense of what we know of war is that men go to war and women are left behind. Women can be widows. Women need to step up to the plate to fill that gap. Filling that gap means that you're stepping into a different reality, that you have more responsibilities that you're not really raised to have. When the war is over, men come back, women have seen different responsibilities. It is very difficult for the country to move forward with the old systems and old norms. So what we have is raised grievances where women have now been responsible for so much more, have taken on roles that are male and female roles as head of household. They need to go out there and run everything. So what we see is a evolution of traditional norms, evolution of what war really brings right now. When we think of the region, of the MENA region, we tend to think of those traditional norms. Yes, men are holding firearms. They go and fight for their country or whatever it is, and then women stay at home. And this is the dominant narrative and rhetoric. But this is not true. This is not true, and we see it today. We see huge protests that are led by women. We see humanitarian aid. We see a huge movement of civil society that is led by women. So this old view of what we think of about war needs to really change, because reality doesn't show that. Reality doesn't show that, with even women holding firearms as well. We see it. We see with the Kurdish fighters, with the Peshmerga. We see so many women that are actually making those decisions and taking on those roles. So really, when we look at how war really affects men and women differently, we can look at it as traditional, in a traditional sense, and we can look at, okay, how are we really progressing today? And today it's very different. Just a little anecdotal evidence. I cannot fill ever the shoes of the women that have been in crisis, in conflict, and I have so much respect for all the women here. We are, let's say, privileged in Kuwait that we haven't seen that, in a sense, but any conflict that happens in the Middle East and North Africa touches everyone really strongly. So in Kuwait, women were organizing talks. Women were organizing awareness campaigns about what is happening in Palestine, about what is happening in Syria. There are, personally, in my classes, as soon as October 7th happened, what we did, I stopped my curriculum in my classes and said, let's sit and we're going to spend a 2-week, 3-week-long education and awareness campaign about what is happening and what is going on, because this is our responsibility, even as women that seem to be removed from directly from the crisis itself or from the conflict. So really, war, even if you are not in it, affects you as well as a woman, because you feel like you're responsible, you understand the pain. There is pain, there are families, there are men, boys, women, girls that are suffering out there. So you have to do something. Civil society moves everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for this. It was very enlightening. I love what you said, that as a woman, even if you are not in war, it affects you. But I also love your KPIs, your key performance indicator. I think we should install these for men around the household to see who does more chores around. I'm gonna move to Karma. And Karma, yesterday you made a joke and you self-identify as a WPS buff. So I'm gonna come to you with that same question. As somebody who worked so much on the WPS agenda, your perspective is even more important, please.
Thank you. It's quite intimidating speaking after 3 doctors, so who pretty much covered everything. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be in Doha. The last time I was at the Sheraton Hotel in Doha was in May of 2008. Qatar had brokered a deal between rival political parties in Lebanon to end an 18-month-long political crisis which had crescendoed into a mini civil war. The Sheraton was locked off, and elevator diplomacy up and down the hotel was on steroids. I was a young policy analyst, younger policy analyst. I mean, I was a younger person working on electoral reform, and my colleague and I felt like we needed to be in Doha. We said, we're going to go to Doha, and we're going to negotiate with the political parties who were working on a new electoral law for Lebanon as part of the big package deal. And we're going to introduce some long-awaited reforms into the legislation.
as we were watching on TV, the planes, the different political parties, of course, not sharing the same aircraft, but traveling separately into Doha airport, my colleague and I spoke to our boss, and we asked him to send us to Doha. And he said, if you can get access, then we will let you go. So we started working out our address book. We started reaching out to the Qataris, we started speaking to different political parties, and we asked for access. Keyword, we asked for access. And we got access. We flew into Doha, and literally, we were at the airport. We had no visas, nothing, no access to the Sheraton. We didn't know how we were on the phone. They let us on the plane. The Qatari authorities spoke to the airport. They said, let these two little young women get on the plane. They have something to do at the conference, at the meeting. And we got here, and our initiative was welcomed by the mediator, by the Qataris who were making this deal, and by the political parties who were quite clueless about electoral reforms and needed that kind of technical assistance. It was right here in this hotel, and I think this is a political landmark in Doha. All the deals are brokered here, and if the walls could only speak, it was right here in the Sheraton where reforms like the pre-printed ballot paper were introduced in the electoral law in Lebanon. Up until then, you could take a paper from home and write the name of, we did not have pre-print, only few countries don't have them, but we got that reform into the law. We could pass the supervisory commission for the elections, the permission for the diaspora to vote. All that happened right here. And that happened because the stars were aligned, because we pushed, and on the other side, there was political will. So to answer your question, that conflict in 2008 had really affected us personally and as people who worked on electoral reform. So we were bold, and the mediator was welcoming and empowering, and the conflict parties lacked the technical expertise. So we leveraged our network. And when it comes to policy and diplomacy, your network is your net worth. And so when we speak about conflict impacting us, women have a way of taking that crisis and transforming it into opportunities in ways that, to be honest, the men sometimes do not see. So here, what I want to say is that it's not about power sharing. It's about responsibility sharing. Let's share the responsibilities of the decisions. Otherwise, the men will take all the blame. So why not share that blame a little bit with the women? And then, it will be fairer. So I wanted to tell the story because, of course, they very, perfectly highlighted some of the key consequences of conflict on women and resolution of conflict. But I want to say that if we don't push, and if we don't ask, and if we don't try, then we will never be at the table. And there are opportunities to do that, and conflicts create opportunities to do that. The Chinese term for crisis is made of two characters, crisis and opportunity. It's within the word, weiji, it's part of their culture. So I think it's time for us to take these conflicts and turn them to opportunities at the micro level, at least for us as women. I'll stop here because everything else was answered.
Thank you, Karma. Thank you. Karma, let me stay with you because my question is related to what you say. So I love what you say that women have ways to transform conflict affecting them into opportunities, and only us know how to do that. What are some key factors that have enabled, according to your experience, of course, women to overcome barriers? You talked about network, you talked about also being bold. What else would you advise?
So again, I want to speak from my own experience because I can't speak for others, but in my case, mentors. I had incredible mentors, mainly male mentors who always pushed me and believed in my abilities at a very young age. As Ruba mentioned, building alliances. I think that we need to build alliances with all the different components of society. We spoke a little bit over the last 2 days about the youth and the youth peace and security agenda. We should not, as women, do to the youth what men have been doing to us for so many decades. We should not marginalize other groups in the community because when we speak about effective inclusion, we should also walk the talk as women. So I think that's also an important thing. The third thing, I think, is that this idea that suddenly we parachute women into high-level negotiations, or suddenly we have to check a box, like you said, we need to check a box because there's a gender focal point and somebody advised the mediator that you need to have a woman on your team. This checking box cannot be parachuted in. Politics, diplomacy is a viper's nest. Politics is a difficult space for men, let alone for women. I mean, the same competition that men have amongst each other is also, sometimes deters agreements and deters solutions, and ego comes into play, and so many different, character or behavioral issues come into play. So what I want to say is that, and this is part of the Diplo Women initiative that I have started a few years ago. I think if we want women to get to these positions, we need to start young. These women need to start young. They need to choose career paths where they say, we want to be in politics, we want to be into diplomacy. I know men who wake up and they're showering and shaving and they're thinking how they want to be the president of the republic. I know them personally. That's all they think. They eat it, they drink it, and they smell it. But women are always, afraid of having that kind of ambition. We should have that kind of ambition, and we need to teach. You are all professors, and I also teach at university. I tell the young women, dream to be shaking the hand of someone else and signing a peace agreement. Dream of being the president of the republic. Dream, and it will come. It will come, but we have to start young. We can't suddenly say, this person is going to be parachuted in. And I think one thing, ما راحت بعدنا صغار شو بكي. One thing I wanted to also invite us to think together is to think out of the box and bear with me with this idea, okay? I think this is the first time I say this in public. We need diplopreneurship, okay? We need to think out of the box and we need diplopreneurs. And I define this diplopreneurship as the intersection of mediation, the private sector, and the political and diplomatic elite who are willing to think together to find innovative solutions to complex challenges in conflict and post-conflict settings. This idea of multi-layered diplomacy is not there for fun or for academic purposes. It's there because if we really want to genuinely address these complex conflict settings, we need all hands on deck. We need the private sector on deck, we need the women on deck, we need everyone on deck. So we need to start thinking out of the box of how to approach these situations. And the minute we start thinking out of the box, women naturally fit into the solution. It's no more a question of only the two people in the room who are locked and discussing these things. And by the way, as a mediator, the nature of our work is very private. There are many women doing amazing work, but for protection purposes, they can't speak about them. And they can't, talk about this. And they are behind the scenes, and they're working on technical issues, and they're trying to do the best they can, but they're not in the forefront. You only see the final photo op of two men shaking hands. So I think that those women who are on the back should slowly be pushed also to be put in the forefront.
Thank you. So Very, very enlightening, being bold, having ambitious alliances, networks. But as we said also yesterday, we are very cognizant of the fact that around this table, but in the room, we are very privileged Arab women. And we said yesterday that it's our duty, to pull up those women who have less chances than us. And we said it in Arabic, and we say, يجب توسيع وتكبير المساحة, which we really need to do, enlarge the space for those who are down and who don't have the same chances. And I think this is our responsibility. I'm gonna move to Dr. Mhaysan, and I would like your opinion and perspective on how are women leveraging their unique perspective and experiences to create innovative approaches to conflict resolution.
Okay, I think when I go out of this room, I will not have one Western or European friends. I love you all. It's been 2 days. I'm like Sarah is shaking her head. Okay. But I just want to say that women's role in mediation is not a Western invention. Okay? Women's role in mediation actually started a very, very, very long time ago in our region. And one of the lead women mediators, actually, and politicians, was Khadija, one of the first wife of Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this lady was his protector, she was his advisor. She calmed people down when there was, tension. She resolved disputes in the community. She was his funder, mind you, when he first started. So she had all the powerful tools to be a master mediator and politician. And the second biggest mediator I know in the Middle East was my grandma. In the Middle East? In the Middle East and North Africa. No, but I mean, really, my granddad would bring the money, and he thought he was making all the decisions. But in fact, she was really, in a very soft way, driving all of these decisions to the point where she felt, and I'm sure, I see a lot of people smiling because, this is how it happened behind closed doors. So again, as I said, this is one of the things I love using. One of the most powerful peace-building techniques in Syria, at least, but I'm sure in a lot of other places, to stop conflicts is the word Allah yarda alaik. God bless you, my son. Don't take revenge from the man in the other tribe. And my father would shake if his mom told him, God bless you, don't do this, because, that would stop him. So women in our societies, in very different tools than the diplomacy tools that we know, play huge mediation roles. And as much as Karma said is very important that there are women at big tables, peace agreements start way before they are signed. And they also start way below track 1. Because if track 1 is signed and there is no infrastructure to hold it in the communities, conflict we will trickle back to the conflict, So there are so many soft power mediators and soft techniques that happen, and we need to capture these. And we also need to start thinking about politics and mediation and resolving problems, not only defining politics with a big P. Politics is only if you're a prime minister or you're a minister or you're a president. No, if you are a woman working in the humanitarian sector, you are also a politician because you are brokering. If you are a refugee woman who wants her kids to get into school and this school is full, you are doing politics, So, the everyday politics, it's part of life. So we need to start, first of all, rethinking leadership and rethinking mediation. It's not only the most formal ways that happens, it happens every day. We need to take pride, I think, as Arabs or as, people in the Arab regions, also, about the legacy that we have, because we have a huge legacy in that, whether it is in our language, whether it is in the tools that we can use. There's so many examples, I mean, in the Syrian context where that has happened. So, for example, there is the Syrian Women Community Mediators Network that I started. It's exactly for the women that if you see them, they are not English speakers, they are not frontliners. Some of them are doulas, some of them are moms, some of them are teachers, but they are doing everyday mediation. There's so many other examples. Oral history and storytelling is one of the biggest tools of peace building. Sometimes when women come together and drink mette and drink coffee and resolves their own disputes, this is also mediation. You know, in our communities, sometimes so many conflicts get resolved over a rekwe and a cup of coffee. So this is also another example. In tribal councils, religious personalities, all of these people do mediation. So let's start to broaden the way we think about diplomacy. And I absolutely love the term karma. You have to get copyright it quickly, yeah, scholarly, but then open it also, democratize it, because really, mediation is all about entrepreneurship, because you need resources and you need to convince and negotiate, and this is happening, and we need to take pride in the way that we do mediation. I think, even if it is different than other ways that mediation can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Iraqat, can you share examples of women-led initiative in Palestine that are successful, that are bringing a difference, that are making a difference?
Well, thank you. Sitting here, I just can think of the women in Gaza now, the women in Jenin, the women in Tulkarem, in Nablus, in the refugee camps. And I need to send a message here in Doha that please always remember that the sufferings of the Palestinians is not in one place or another. Everybody is attacked. This is, Israel has a bigger project. And let's all focus that it's the men and women and education that can take us out as well. So before I answer your question of the different organizations we have in Palestine, I would like to touch upon who empowered me as Dalal Ariqat, to be vocal, to be strong, to say the truth, and to dare to say the truth where the room is filled with men. It was for nobody but for my father, Allah yarhamu. But it was not because of the genes he inherited. It was because of the education he got. It was because of the exposure he got. So he did not see me only as an equal as his daughter, but also my mother and his employees and his partners and his colleagues. He didn't see any difference between the girl and the boy in the society. And that's why I hope that I am raising my kids today, and all of us will be raising the new generations. Going back to Palestine, you will find not tens, hundreds of women-led organizations in the refugee camp of Jenin. We have so many women-led organizations in Jenin, in Nablus, in Jericho, in Ramallah, so many. We also have, the historic union of women under the umbrella of the PLO, the Liberation Organization. We also have a ministry of women's affairs. And we also align with CEDAW, Palestine signed. And of course, we report to different conventions, and we report to 1325, and we're part of the WPS agendas, the Beijing agendas too. So the efforts are enormous in Palestine. Yet, maybe as we are talking about the different initiatives, some of them are focused on advocacy, gender policies. Others are focused on empowering women economically or in other, decision-making, education, economic empowerment. However, the one lesson learned that we as Palestinian women and organizations have to learn, that unfortunately for the past 30 years, since the beginning of the peace process, there was, the donor effect which is a negative effect. I'm sorry to say that. And I'm not saying that as a criticism only, but I am urging everybody to revise and to reconsider the funding conditions. Because unfortunately, most of the organizations in Palestine are more focused on checking the boxes, doing the reporting, and getting the funding, rather than reaching the goals, the intending goals. Because, and this takes me to a very important point, that so many people and so many countries and so many governments and so many donors think that to empower women economically, politically, whatever, it's through capacity building, through trainings. Please, if I have an advice to anybody, let's not put the big chunk of the percentage of funding on training. Let's try to be creative. Let's try to do something else. Let's try to do simulations. But please, let's abandon training for a bit. In Palestine, I have founded the Business and Professional Women Network 2 years ago, where we are trying to establish this platform for the empowered women. There are a lot of NGOs that work on empowering women, you know, the small businesses, the small empowerment, the trainings, the younger girls. This is all important. This is very important. Some work on humanitarian aid, medical care, whatever. We thought, myself with another 33 women from different sectors, from academia, from agriculture, from molecular genetics, from engineering, architecture, sciences, all different spectrums, that we as individual empowered women, we had managed and succeeded to come as, you know, success stories of Palestine. We penetrated so many platforms all around the world. However, we realized that no matter what we do as individuals, it will never compare to the power that we will have and to the impact that we can do in Palestine unless we come together, unless we join our forces. And again, this is not rhetorical. This is not cosmetic at all. We continue to push, each and every one of us in her own way. But we came up also with an idea of, and we ran it. We actually conducted the first Palestinian Women Summit in March 23, and March last year, and of course in line with the International Women's Day. So the idea is not only advocacy and to try to help the decision makers and the policy makers advance more policies that are more inclusive of women, but also because I strongly believe, and the Palestinian women strongly believe, that the Palestinian women are the 21st century national brand for Palestine. I really want to brand Palestine and change that image and stereotyping. We are not the victims any longer. We are the resilient people, and the Palestinian women, the success stories, they are heroic. And this is what we need to show the world, that we are attractive, yes, in our power, in our capabilities, in our skills, and what we have in common with so many people around the world. So here we come, we're trying to shift the narratives and shift the ways of thinking, yet we also need some international mechanisms. You know, as I mentioned, we have UN Security Council resolutions, we have the WPS. We need to move from the walk into the talk, you know, translating all those actions, translating all the statements and the nice civilized language, you know, when the different governments, speaking of the American administration, for example, and the previous one, everybody speaks of equal measures, prosperity. This cannot happen. This cannot be translated on the grounds unless Palestinian women, like Palestinian, of course, civilians, are granted their rights. This is not a favor that we are talking about. And somebody might tell me, yes, you can continue to educate yourselves, go focus on technology, do entrepreneurship, karma, do some whatever, virtual businesses. Okay, thank you, we're trying to do everything, yet the Israeli military occupation can only grant me, in the best case scenario, 3G services in the West Bank and 2G services in Gaza. So yet again, when I decide and say, I will put the Israeli military occupation on the side and I will challenge myself and we need to work harder as Palestinians, we get faced again and again with the first and last of our challenges, which is the military occupation, the most prolonged, military occupation, which must end for those different efforts in Palestine to realize. We have quotas, by the way, in Palestine. Yet, unfortunately, when you see the level and the percentage of the educated women in Palestine, 60% of the students on the graduate level holding graduate degrees in Palestine are females. Yet, look at the market. It's 19% of market share, let alone, of course, the senior positions, which doesn't rise it's really very low. There is no correlation. And here, allow me to also say and acknowledge our internal setbacks, not only as Palestinians, but also as Arabs and as Middle Easterns. We cannot neglect that there are some stereotypings and some structural, cultural barriers that have to do with patriarchy, that have to do with the glass ceiling that is very low above our heads, that has to do with the masculine dominant society that unfortunately for the Palestinian woman had been entrenched with the settler colonial project that we are suffering from, with the military occupation. That had increased and intensified the power of this masculine dominant society. I'll stop here, thank you.
There is so much to unpack there, but I liked what you said about, quotas. We all have in the Arab world a lot of quotas. I think in North Africa, for instance, a country like Algeria until recently used to have 32% of the parliament was women. But then again, the question is, what did these women really do, and what kind of freedom they had to take into consideration, the voices of all female Algerians. So quotas are not always the solution. Training are not always the solution. I love what you said. And conditionality, I worked for the European Union for a while, and I always said you cannot just throw money on the problem without having a monitoring, system and also accountability. I remember doing a study for female entrepreneurs in Algeria. And this woman was very smart and witty, and she said, Dalia, when the European Union is in the room, all the Algerians in the room become Simone de Beauvoir. They all want the funds, so they all check the gender box. Once the money is given, there is no accountability, so they don't even have to say we did that on women's issues. So conditionality, I think, is very important. But I'm gonna make a quick tour. I want you, as we do know that we have great, amazing policymakers in the room, to give them your 2 cents on exactly how can we ensure that women's voices are meaningfully including in all stages of peace processes. Very quickly, we'll go to Dr. Shaibi, and we will continue so we can give also the audience a chance to interact with you and to ask you questions.
Wow, this cannot be very quick, but I'll try. I think an important thing is what we're trying to do here is to challenge the narrative, right? And the problem that we see is that women, when you want to include women in anything, their role is feminized. So conflict has been feminized. For example, I want to negotiate, I'm on the table, I want to negotiate about something. Humanitarian aid is automatically given to a female. Military decision, reconstruction is given to a male. So even when women are at the table, their roles are feminized, right? So this is what you're good at. Civil society, what Ruba was talking about, that they can, they have soft power, so they're marginalized again. So there is a mold that women cannot get in. And this is with historical path dependence. What is happening is, just a really quick thing, that a long time ago, so everyone here in their workplace know that women are always cold at work, right? So what women do, they cope with this idea. They don't question, they say, let me bring a jacket. So men are always like their male counterparts, oh, women are always cold. Let me tell you why women are always cold. Before women were integrated into the workplace, before they got their rights, there was a system set in place to measure what is a good ideal work environment to increase productivity for men. So they took an average Caucasian male and said, let's study what is a good temperature for him. All right, so they set that temperature. Years later, yay, we won, we got our rights, we are in the marketplace. No one questioned that. So what women do is they cope. So women are trying to fit a mold that is predetermined, male-dominated thought process, right? So even with negotiations, when women think differently, men are like, wait, but that's the norm, that's how we do it, what are you doing? So you either think like us, let's do it, let's sign agreements, or whatever you say is, okay, good ideas, let's think about it later. So the system, inherently, the system, male-dominated system has to change. So I need to ask questions and say, why do I have to go to work and always wear a jacket? I don't accept that. But women are not taught to ask. So this is one thing that we really need to deconstruct when talking about policy. Just change the way it is. Bring men and women. You know that in the stock market crash 2008, there was one bank that actually did not crash in Iceland. They wanted to know why. The president of the bank was a female. Not because she's a female. They studied that under crisis, women make decisions under pressure, thinking of the collective. Men under crisis in the stock market, ego kicks in. And they make decisions based on that.
Men are not happy now.
I mean, that's just, studies. So just understanding it's male and female think differently, but they complement each other. So there are different ways of approaching a problem. We just need to say, hey, there is a mold that has been there for years. That's how we do things. Let's forget that. Here's like a fresh piece of paper. How would we do things? And bring men and women on the table. You will find solutions that are beautiful. Thank you.
You have special standing up ovation there for you from our colleague Françoise. So Dalal, then Ruba, and then Karma, please.
Well, thank you. I think I have 2 or 3 messages. The first one of which, the lesson learned is that such a panel of a female dominant panel should not be a yay, yes, nice, we did something special, or a provocative action. This should be normal. Second thing is, yes, we need to raise boys and girls who see each other as equal, responsible individuals in their societies. Not only equal in terms of what they get, but also what they give to their societies. Number 3, and this is to the policymakers, and this is a message that I want to convey to Qatar and to the Qatari government. Qatar had been, and I teach this to my students, I teach diplomacy. Qatar had set an amazing role model of brokering different conflicts, not only in the Middle East, from Venezuela to Afghanistan, but also for the Palestinians, for the Syrians, the Lebanese, on the internal reconciliation and broader political conflicts. So I would love to see Qatar setting the grounds in entrenching and advancing their role model of brokering in having more women at the table. It is by demonstrating that, I think, and we all think, I guess, that Qatar is capable, and if they set this role model, I think they will anchor to be replicated, and that would be the norm from now on. Not only about, if we look at the Palestinian reconciliation talks, for the past 17 years, the different LA tours in different capitals, unfortunately, we don't see women representation. And again, we don't want to only advocate for women just because of their gender, but we want the right people in the right places. No, we don't want equal basis, but the inclusion of women. And I hope that Qatar will lead in setting this role model. Thank you, everybody.
Speaking of temperature, it's so cold. والله تلجت أنا. كتير برد. Men are not cold. Look. No, I'm joking. No. Speaking of anecdotes, Karma, I was also young-ish and still young, but I was at the UN headquarters in New York, and I was with a colleague, Zozan, you would know him, Mazen Darwish, and we were going to meet, just to say that not to blame everything on men. We were meeting with an ambassador, and it was a woman ambassador from a Scandinavian country. I will not name it, but it's a woman. And we went in, me and my colleague Mazen, and it was a briefing on humanitarian issues in Syria. He's more on the justice accountability side of things, and we had the next meeting on justice, but this meeting we went together as a team, you know. So we went in, and the ambassador gave Mazen her card. And then she asked him what he wanted to drink, and I'm not joking. And then she asked him to introduce himself, and then she asked him to give the briefing. And then he said, well, actually, I'm here to accompany my colleague. Haram, I could not tell you how her face become. So just not to always tackle men, you know, we all have been conditioned to be these people. Yani, women who are, yani, and as Karma said, we risk doing the same thing with younger people. When they talk, we're like, oh, what are they talking about? You know, but no, it's their space, they have to talk. So, yani, just not to blame everything, the structure and the institutions, the systems have become this way, and we all have to put an effort to counter these systems. But maybe just a few tips. If a woman talks, don't try to repeat what she said in your own way. You know, don't ask women, what are we having for lunch today at the office? You know, what do you think we should order? You know, when a woman starts speaking, don't hold your phone. Because when a man speaks, everyone is listening. But when a woman starts speaking, everybody remembers to check their emails and meetings. Anjad, it really annoys me. Don't say, Dr. Muhammad and Sister Ruba. I spent also 4 years doing my PhD, you know, as long as he did, you know. Don't make it symbolic, as Dalal said. Like you really need to have good women in the right places, and don't accept to speak at a panel if there are no women on the panel. You have the power to say no, yani, as men. You can say, oh, by the way, where are our women colleagues? It makes the panel much more fun to have us. Try to help with the double burden, because it's very tiring if I have to go home after a panel and still brush my son's teeth. And, you know, it's nice to go back home where some of these things have been done by my husband and by, you know, people in the household. For women, I would say I don't think we should continue shying away from being emotional or talking about our emotions. It's a sign of power. It's not a sign of vulnerability to bring any emotion into the workplace. It's absolutely fine. I think for women also, we need to start loving our ideas, because men are great at loving their ideas. So we should also do that. Yeah, obsessed with our ideas, and not to question ourselves as much, because I think also as women we have an imposter syndrome, and sometimes it's not about the men, it's like an inherent thing. So that's, thank you for coming for my TED Talk, and I'm done.
So maybe just 3 points. Women inclusion should not be a burden. It shouldn't be like this, oh, we just had the Swedes visit us and tell us we need to include women. It shouldn't be a burden. Yeah, I mean, I hear this many times. You know, an ambassador comes in, visits a government official, and they told us to include. It shouldn't be a burden. It's just, it's like I said, share responsibility. So let's not look at it as a burden, but rather as really something that will make something more successful, or an act more successful, whether it's peacemaking, whether it's deal making, whether it's mediation or whatnot. There was a recent Baker and McKinsey report that predicted that by 2036, lawyers will become obsolete. Thankfully, mediation, diplomacy, and negotiations are in their core inherently human endeavors, and require the right doses of intelligence, emotional awareness, and empathy. And at the end of the day, nothing will replace the handshake that brings about an agreement or peace. And I think women do embody these characteristics. But at the same time, there's a whole new dimension of conflict that we need to look at things differently. So as maybe traditionally, or also we see it now, you know, there's land, air, and sea, and violent conflict and armed conflict. We have now this whole cyberspace dimension of conflict. And women have a role to play there as well, all the technical expertise that come with it. Perhaps the cyberspace could be a less discriminating space. And here, when I speak about AI, yes, AI is acting as a multiplier for existing threat vectors and influencing warfare, whether it's cybersecurity or through lethal autonomous weapons, to name just a few. AI can also be a multiplier for peacebuilding activities. And if using AI for enhanced threat mitigation or AI's power of predictive analysis to develop cooperative AI models to help in mediation and resource allocation. And maybe AI will finally tell the donors to coordinate and not to bond, not to put their money in the same activities, and to avoid duplication and triplication. So I think that's also where women, have to bring their perspective when it comes to all that technical side of things. And finally, I think that many of our countries, at least the panel, Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon, we're now embarking on a reconstruction spree, on a reconstruction journey. And when I say reconstruction, I don't only mean al-hajar, مش الحجر بس. We have to reconstruct our institutions. We have to reconstruct our fragmented societies. We have to reconstruct our social contracts, whether it's in any of our countries. And we have missed enough opportunities not to do reconciliation through reconstruction. And I think that women on all levels, so from grassroots to the ones who are already in decision making, there is a lot of work to be done. And I think that we all need to be very, very alert to including the women in these phases of the reconstruction of our countries. So these are my 3 cents.
Thank you. Thank you for this. So I'm going to turn to the audience and take 2 to 3 questions. We have people here who can give you the mic. Please introduce yourself very quickly, ask your question, and tell us to whom you are asking the question. Well, I know they were fantastic. They addressed everything, but come on, you may have a question. Sarah there.
Hi.
سلمى حكينا 3 أيام سوا.
Sarah?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hi. Thank you so much for the Middle East Council and for IFI for putting together this wonderful, wonderful panel. An all-woman panel is an exception. This is not the norm. I have personally not seen a lot of all-women
We
panel.
at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, we are exceptional. Thank you.
True.
Bravo.
True. So I ran a couple of numbers while my colleagues were speaking, based on data that we collected. And it's going to take another 60 years for gender equality to be reached in diplomacy. Now, I know all of us here are young, but we're not that young, so we're probably not going to be...
Invest in longevity.
Yeah, but I'm probably not going to be around to see it, right? And the picture is actually very, very bleak. There are still not enough women diplomats. There are still not enough women mediators. There are still not enough women negotiators. As much as we celebrate and commemorate, they're nowhere. As much as we push, as much as we lobby, as much as we bring our own chairs to the table, as Karma did in 2008, it's simply not translating at a quick enough pace for this to actually be making a difference. And it's not just a numbers problem. You know that, even if we have a lot of women negotiators or diplomats or whatever, they're not being sent to capitals where strategic decisions are being taken. They get sent with all due respect, but to, the Nordic countries, to the Scandinavian countries. But what about Beijing, Delhi, DC? This is where we basically need to see more women. So my question is, in light of the fact that these decisions are made behind closed doors, by men, mostly, how do we bring a chair to the table? How? Just, I really want to hear your thoughts, because you are all in positions that, I'm an academic, so I'm not in a space to be making these decisions, but just if you can maybe shed light over how can we make that difference, right? And how do we ensure that, women are in positions and in capitals where decisions are being taken, and how can we speed up the process of reaching that sort of equality in diplomacy? Thank you. And I don't know who would like to answer this, but if you could all maybe chip in, it would be great.
Absolutely. Let's start with Noura, please.
Thank you for this question. I'd like to think maybe in 60 years we don't have wars. So we reached, global peace maybe. We don't know. That's a very good observation. And there is like a gap between the number of women who graduate with peace and conflict resolution studies related degrees and the number of conflicts, the number of negotiations on the table. I think we need to focus on low-hanging fruit, okay? Just so we're more practical and pragmatic, so we can decrease that 60-year gap. The whole idea of tokenism, which has been floated around, which is like the symbolic thing, let's tick the box, we need a woman at the table. It is a double-edged sword. So yes, this is, unfair. It's not really giving any substance to the case, but women can take advantage of that in the sense that this means that their governments or their institutions or something have signed responsibilities of some sort of representation. So then there is accountability. So you can actually go knock on the door and say, okay, this one token person, let's see what she has done. Okay, can we train her? Sorry, you don't like training. Can we empower her? She's already empowered to do more. Okay, let's test out. Let's rotate the women. That's great. Like push on that low-hanging fruit where the country, the institution, whatever it is, signed an agreement. Let's hold that accountable and push that door and keep pushing. So that's.
Thank you, Noura. Dalal, your 2 cents on this?
I'll add maybe one more practical way to take this forward, because in Palestine, we are working on advancing and pushing for a feminist foreign policy. Of course, inspired by the Scandinavians, and this might not take us to the end goal. That's why we don't only advocate for having women as ambassadors and diplomats, but for the diplomatic law in every country, to start with Palestine, to make sure that there is a good inclusion based on merit, and that the diplomatic institutes and the diplomatic academies of our own countries graduate those people who are not only trained, but who have the skills, the knowledge, the experience, and enough education. And maybe UN Security Council Resolution 1325 or the WPS agenda can also adopt a more binding mechanism on all member states in the UN to make sure that inclusivity is ensured, and those countries who are joining those conventions not only adopt a feminist foreign policy, but make sure that the right people, like men, like women, are in the diplomatic representation. Thank you.
Yes, so maybe making resolutions a little bit more accessible, because if 1325 is full of very technical terms, it becomes a floating document that is not being used every day. And I feel like people every day need to be able to find diplomacy something that is easy and accessible for them. I think we are at a golden time right now, because genuinely, if I have been here before December 8, 2024 on the panel, I would have been a whole different person. I don't want to engage in politics because there is normalization with the Assad regime, and because Gaza, Al-Ibad, like the genocide is ongoing, and because in Lebanon, we were presidentless, and all of these issues. So I think right now is a golden time for the region, and everyone is talking about politics today. If you go down to Syria now, I don't know why down, but if you go to Syria, Literally, people on the street, in every village, in every corner, everyone is talking about politics. And the youth are, for once, feeling like they have ownership and agency over their own countries. And they want to have a voice and they want to have a say. So, yani, it is a very golden opportunity. Also, maybe don't do any board meetings after 6 p.m. This is also very, very important. Okay, no, but genuinely, I think it's a very important opportunity right now to really work on politics. Yani, political programming in the region, because people are so thirsty for it after years of like oppression and dictatorships.
So maybe Karma will take the next one. But we have Dr. Salma Nims and also Suzanne there, and somebody here who wants to ask a question. Did I? And another person there. So we have four.
First of all, thank you so much for this inspiring panel. It's been a while since I got such an, inspirational, and it's with the substance. It's not because only women are there. And that's what I want to talk about. The core to why we are facing this increased conflict in the world is the internalizing of patriarchal concepts among politicians, men or women. We see extreme right, radical right in Europe, which is led by women. So what we need to bring back is the beautiful romanticized principles and values of what we think women brought to the table and would bring to the table, but it needs to be adopted within diplomatic teaching, by men as well as by women. And I think this is something that we need to also push forward. So maybe, Karma, since you are one of the, and you were going to answer the next question, to tell us how could women, such as you, how could they change men at the table to adopt concepts where the end of a negotiation is not victory, but compromise, because in the end, really, we cannot reach anything if it's not compromise, Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nims. Before
sure,
Karma, let us
questions?
take a round of questions with who was the second? I think Suzanne, person in the front, and then there. You can be? How nice of you. You see women mediators. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Ghulam Asmal. I'm the ambassador of South Africa. And thank you to the Middle East Council and the panel for a fantastic panel. It almost sounds like deja vu, because just before the birth of the democratic South Africa in 1994, we were having similar types of discussions. My observation is that much of the discussion has been on mediation and so on. But how much investment should we be making in reconstruction and development, truth and reconciliation, and most importantly, social cohesion after conflicts? I think the preoccupation with mediation and all that sort of gives an impression that we are defeaters and not convinced of victory thereafter. But the real work begins after victory, when you're out of the limelight of the international community and you're left to your own devices and devious policies of others. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. The person in the back, and then Suzanne. Good, thank you.
Hi, I'm Khalid Ahmed. I'm a professor of conflict resolution and development at the Qatar University and Department of International Affairs. I'm highly intrigued by everything I heard here today. Thank you very much for your honesty and sharing everything, including your personal experiences with us. I just want to ask a question and I want to comment. Dr. Roba, you mentioned something very interesting about how you reinterpreted your grandma's actions as a form of mediation, and I think that's very intriguing, local indigenous ways of understanding mediation or redefining mediation. And I think we need to build on that and redefine mediation using local experiences and local perspectives. But that also took me to another place. Why not redefine peace itself, the definition of peace, from a local ontology and epistemology, especially those who are in Palestine and Syria. The women there experience something, they're very drastic and dynamic. They have a very different understanding of peace and what it means, rather than having a cookie-cutter approach to peace and just distribute it around the world as if it has one meaning. So I don't know if that already begun or something that you would be, interested in doing. And I have a question for Karma. You mentioned something about partnership with the private sector. Could you elaborate on that and how exactly and what kind of a private sector and why? Thank you.
Suzanne, very quickly, your question.
Actually, I think the gentleman already mentioned my question. My question is to Karma and maybe Ruba also, because they both had, or maybe Ruba had something about the economy and women. So now, as a woman coming from private sector, I think it's time to think not only about the mediation and politic, we should also think how we can bring more women to market and to private sector. During my work in Syria, 13 years, I just wanted to see one corrupted woman in the black market. No one. Just to know, really, I'm sorry to say that, but no one. All the war, تجار حرب? شو? Are men. I mean, I just want one woman, so I can just, begin from somewhere, because we should be in the market. So my question is to Karma and Ruba also. Now it's the time to think how we can bring more women to the market, to economic stuff. And we have a lot of women in private sector, but they are not in the front line. It's time also to bring them, how we can bring them and engage more with these women. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we're going to start with Karma, then Ruba.
So first, just quick reality checks. Wars are not going to end. They teach us at a very young age that, Adam and Eve had 2 boys, one killed the other, were descendants of killers. Technically, if you think about it, it's not going to go anywhere. It's human nature. Sometimes there are academics who argue that peace is the exception and war is the natural state of humanity. So, we don't want to get into a philosophical conversation or an academic debate, but yes, they're not going to go. So we're not going to be out of business anytime soon, right? So that's the first reality check. Second, you mentioned about the victories. When we do mediation training or when we give mediation training, one exercise that we do is we write. So let's say there are 2 conflict parties. We are given the task of writing the victory speech of both sides. We do that. We sit and we write the victory speech of both conflict parties, because every conflict party wants to sell the victory to its people, to its constituencies. And as mediators, we need to understand that psychology. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of the conflict party who's going to get up on television and say, we won, the other side lost. And that's okay. That's another reality check. Every conflict is a lose-lose conflict, in my opinion. But optics matter. And every conflict party needs to sell a victory. And we as mediators need to do that. And so I don't mind. بالعربي بنقول بدنا ناكل عنب ما بدنا نقتل الناطور. أنا بدي آكل عنب. We want to solve the problem. The optics are going to remain optics, and we should also accept that as women. And this is something that men and women think differently about. But I think I've spent so much time with, our political. I don't want to call elite, but I can't find another. Leadership that. We learn how they think. And I think that women should accept that they should spend time and energy understanding also how the men are thinking, so that we can find a middle ground. So I wanted to say that. With regards to the truth and reconciliation, I mentioned in my last intervention that we are embarking on a long journey of reconstruction and reconciliation and rebuilding our institutions and social cohesion. So I fully could not agree more that truth and reconciliation, whether it's in Palestine, intra-Palestinian, intra-Syrian, and intra-Lebanese, are cornerstones of rebuilding our states, of rebuilding our state institutions and revisiting our social contract, because people are afraid to say this. They're afraid to talk about the change that we need. There's a reason why you have the First Republic, the Second Republic, the Third Republic in France, for instance, you're at the Fifth Republic, right? There's a reason why these things happen, because you revisit your governance structure, you revisit the political system, and this is a natural evolution of any nation state, and it's okay. We should not be afraid of that. So I fully agree with what you said. And with regards to the private sector, a few years ago, the Danes appointed an ambassador to Silicon Valley. I was infatuated by that and researched it a little bit more, and I understood that they had come to terms with the idea that the GAFA, so the big, the Google, Apple, Amazon, the Facebook at the time, Meta, there did not exist. They are ruling the world, and they are playing that gray area of diplomacy between countries. I mean, today, we are embarking, I think, on a decade of transactional politics and transactional diplomacy with the different leaders that are emerging across the world. I mean, everyone gives Trump as an example, but it's not only the United States. It's a pendulum swing. This is natural. It happens, over history. You go to one extreme and then you go to the other extreme. But we are now going to that extreme where politics is going to be highly transactional, diplomacy is going to be highly transactional, and I would say high-powered diplomacy is going to be dominant. This idea of peace through strength is going to be mainstreamed a little bit in the next decade. So you have Elon Musk sitting in the White House. That's a very basic example of the private sector playing, its role. So what I'm trying to say, and I don't want to take all the time, but we have to think of how to monetize peace with the private sector. War is a lucrative business. People make a lot of money out of wars. And sometimes they prolong it because they're selling certain weapons, or there's a military industry behind it, or all that. How can we monetize peace to show the private sector that they are partners in, that this will make you more money then? Everyone has a way to speak to them. The politicians have a language you use with them. The private sector has a language you use. The media has a language that we should use with them. And we should understand the psychology of all these different stakeholders in the peace-building ecosystem so that we can come out with optimum situations and long-term peace for conflicts.
Thank you, Karma. Ruba, very quickly.
Zozan, if you want me to introduce you to all the corrupt women in Syria, I can. Yeah. Because there are many. So just to go on Ambassador's question, I agree with you fully. And by the way, when we used to bring women to do peace between them on the ground, bringing them to a hotel room when they both lost a son from the other party was not a good solution. But bringing them to open a business and to talk about, their suffering and to find out that their suffering is much similar, and then to do livelihoods together and to do a governance project together, that was a much quicker way to peace. So I do agree with you. If there is no economic, the wheel of the economy is not عجلة الاقتصاد عم ترجم, and all of these issues are not in place, there will never be like a sustainable peace. About redefining things, I absolutely love that. Academics, we love to redefine things. So definitely localize the concept of peace. My PhD was on why women economic empowerment as defined by the West doesn't work in our region, because it's a very whole different paradigm. So I do agree with you. The same way we need to redefine, mediation, look at leadership differently, look at what peace constitutes, and not only West and East, because this is a very old divide, and South and North is also an old divide, but also within our region, different countries have different notions, but also within Syria today, if you ask the coast coastal Syria, what peace means to them, it may look very different than Idlib or than Northeast or than Damascus, which has been privileged all of these years. So also that like localization of like and definition. So thank you very much. And this really proves that, you know, we do complement each other as men and women. It's definitely not a rivalry. Thank you.
And I want to finish this panel on a positive note. We have all been watching the images of women, children, men in Gaza moving back to the rubble. Please remember and don't normalize with those images. The women of Gaza deserve to go back to life, to decency, to dignity, to freedom, to statehood, and to self-determination, to their dreams and to their families. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. As we move forward, let us carry with us the understanding that sustainable peace will not be achieved without women. Please join me in thanking these amazing women. Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you. Thank you, really.